Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Mind on the Rocks podcast. Today is a really special episode, and we have a really special guest. So,
Tyler, so you are the host of the STAG podcast, and
mhm,
that's how we met. And you've been talking about masculinity and manliness and stuff like that. So tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into the stuff like this, and just a little bit about your history and
All right. Well, this is going to be interesting because there's going to be certain aspects of my life just putting it out front that I might not talk about because of anonymity purposes. But outside of that, I'm happy to talk about anything else. And I guess we just touch on I'm a normal person like anybody else, honestly. I'm just like some random person on the internet, and I just wanted to talk to dudes about manliness and what it meant to be a man. And I know there's stuff out there already, but I wasn't really like, I guess the short answer on that is I wasn't trying to produce content. I wasn't trying to produce a
Mhm.
podcast. I was trying to answer a question because I don't like men. I've been around men my whole life, obviously, like most dudes, right? But it's not that I can't be in a room with another dude. It's most dudes are like that I knew growing up were like chimpanzees and cavemen. They were like animals, and it was like stupid. I don't know if I can curse on here or not. It was like dick jokes, fart jokes. It was just nonsense
Yeah,
all the
go
time,
for it.
right? And it's the stereotypical 2000s era, late 99s era college comedy movie. That's how most dudes that I knew existed, right? And to some degree, I can say that like was engaged in that realm of manly behavior, right? And I think it was just for me by association of my environment rather than who I was. And anytime I kind of went outside of that or was encouraged to move past those kinds of quote norms of my environment, I was treated different from guys. And what ended up happening is I became really resentful at most men. And I mostly was raised by women because of my home situation with fathers, and the strongest pillars of masculinity were my grandfathers. So their daughters raised me, right? And or
Mm.
their wives raised me. And so I was already a little bit different from a lot of dudes I knew around me. And so to wrap that
So your
back to the
podcast
show,
was in a way trying to just answer the question that you had, what
yeah,
masculinity was to yourself.
yeah, what did I get wrong? Right? What am I
Mm,
missing it? Because I honestly I don't care. It doesn't mean anything
mm,
to me. It doesn't like all of these weird associations we have with the world and the way that we create these structures and attitudes and ideals and titles, and we label everything, and it's all symbolic to me. It doesn't actually mean anything. The entire world is constructed by some loose handshake, and everyone is just seemingly agreeing to half-ass do what they say they're going to do, and that's how the world is actually functioning. And I think if most people knew that, they would shit their pants, right? But that's really how it's working, right? And so
yeah.
sometimes we see these things that look like grand conspiracies in the world, especially in the worlds of politics, and I promise you that a lot of it has to do with behind it. If someone actually was like a fly on the wall, it probably has to do more with self-interest, greed, and mostly incompetence, right? So incompetence looks dangerous and structured and intelligent when it operates a certain way. It's fascinating. But back to your point, I was just trying to answer a question, man, and I wanted to see if I got it wrong. And since then, I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, well, there's a subset of dudes who they just operate a certain way, and that's never changed. And I think that I just grew up in that world by virtue of being poor and in a city or town where just a lot of people like that lived there, and had no dreams, no
Mm,
aspirations, and all of that. And I was not the same way. I was an adventurer. I was always seeking adventure. I was always trying to push the barrier. I'm trying to plant that flag as high as I possibly can on that mountain before I die. I don't want to live a
mm.
mediocre life, and I don't. And I was surrounded by mediocre men, and sometimes I still am. And to be quite frank, it pisses me off. It's annoying. I'm not the most accomplished man in the world, but I'm not lazy or unwilling or any of those things by any means. And there's a lot of those dudes in the world, and it's fucking infuriating. That
So
work.
is that what you figured out in talking to all of these people, that masculinity basically is two sides, basically, with one side of men who are complicit and who just wants to live their life, and the other side of men who are trying to achieve something for themselves.
I don't think that I would say that any one individual person or series of conversations I had actually drew a line in the sand for me one way or the other. I think about the third, and it's not the third episode I released, it was just about the third conversation I had. I realized that we're just going to have this trend where this game of what masculinity is and what manhood is and what it means to just be a man, like this question, it's just a stupid game. That's it. And
Mhm.
the game only exists because someone's willing to ask the question. And right. And so if a chest puffing, gun wielding dude came in my space and was like, I'm a man, and I said, no, you're not, it's over. Right? Because it's made up based on some symbolic, social, and verbal contract that I'm having with this individual in the moment, right? If I said, oh
And if
no,
you
you're actually right.
And if you're simply looking at the traits, then I know women who have more masculine traits than some men who have more feminine traits.
Right.
You can't
Right.
simply just assigning to some certain traits being aggressive or being dominant.
Right. And we're just adding labels where you historically have, and we're just going off of that. And I think ultimately what's the funniest thing about it is I've asked a lot of dudes, and so there's no one way or another. To me, really, it's only one container. It's either it quote to be a man, you just do whatever you want, right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean be disrespectful and shit on your environment or the people around you. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that like, it's funny that when you ask men of a certain caliber who believe that they are, stand out above the rest as alpha type or something, they're always asking for permission. And I always found that really anti-alpha, right? That is outside of the alpha norm. Why would you ask for, I don't remember ever seeing anything in nature where they're asking for permission outside of mating rituals, right? And it's like, so it's fascinating to see a lot of, it's all ego is what I'm finding, right? And surely my heroes out in the world, like men like Carl Sagan and Albert Einstein and Ben Franklin, these guys, they weren't right. Joan of Arc is another fantastic story, right? Who had more courage and masculinity expressed than most men that I know today, right? And so the things that I value are in an individual is character and principle and moral, and those things don't know masculine or feminine. They know they're based on courage. They're based on doing the hard thing and doing the thing because it's right, despite the fact that you feel a different way about it, right? And I prefer to operate from that lens. And
So the way you're going at this masculinity is more of, let's not say an emotion, but a mindset rather than a genetic character trait.
right, it's an Instagram filter, and I think people forget that anything in the world of where where we can renegotiate the terms of those containers, those categories, those they're filters, they're lenses, and we can change it at any time. And so, to your point or to your question, that I do view it that way.
That's really interesting. How you started off with this question of how we were just trying to find an answer to manliness, and you came up to this answer, to at least this conclusion that it doesn't really exist in one way or another. So obviously, manliness is historically tied. So do you think there's going to be a time in the future, seeing how our generations are progressing? Do you think there's going to be a time where manliness explodes or doesn't exist anymore in society? What do you think it's going to look like 50 or 100 years down the line?
It's very clear. I don't want to get political right now, but it's very clear that there is a very palpable populist movement in the world right now. And so the image of the strong man is prevailing still, right?
Mm.
And it's hard to disentangle masculinity from that, right? And I think a lot of the attraction to something like that and with people who are just blindly following along. If see, I don't have a problem with people who are mindfully or intelligently following along. It's the my team versus your team thing that I don't understand because a lot of people who are operating in that world are lower cognitive ability and don't actually understand what's happening or blinded by their biases to an effect that they don't actually see up from down or left from right, right? They don't see the world from a just view. It's from a very
Yeah.
partisan view. And so there's this well, daddy's going to take care of it mentality. And the thing with that is inherently tied with some masculine trait that is attractive in the natural world, right? And that is the trait of protection, right? And so from a point of if we're asking and approaching it from like, are we ever going to see a world where protection is not looked at as attractive? I would say no, right? And
Yeah.
so people want to feel protected. They want to feel comfortable. They want to feel that their environment is safe, right? So you're asking people to forego safety in lieu of destroying these categories that we've created or these constructs that we've created so that we can continue on to the world in the unknown, and no one's going to agree to that, right? But
But
it's a good question, man. It's a solid question.
But do you also think that the actual meaning of masculinity and manliness has been changing, and
Yes.
also there's been a lot of change even culturally more than even just through time. Even like that places in the US looks at what masculinity in a different way than places in Asia or Europe.
And to piggyback on that question that you just asked, because it is a good question, I'm going to wrap it back to the point of that I said, where everything operates on a handshake, and it would be scary if everyone really understood that. There's no actual safety or comfort, right? It's all an illusion. So people are having the option to agree to the illusion of safety is all they want, right? Because no one's actually safe, right? And that is also a fleeting. It means something different for everybody, right? And then back to your question just now, though, I think it is always ever changing, and it's going to continue to change. And we're always going to have these different notions of what it means. And which is why I ask on my show all the time, right? You'll hear on every episode what it means to be a man to you. It's because to me, it really is just an individual journey, and it doesn't actually matter. And the entire purpose of asking that question or having the conversations is to set myself apart from the shows or the context of anything else that's happening out there, right? There's dudes in the space of manliness and manhood and raising boys who are doing awesome work. But it's very apparent that they're approaching it from like, well, we don't like Andrew Tate, so we have to do something about this. And there's something really stupid about that to me because the Andrew Tates of the world are going to exist, right? And I'm not a fan, right? And it's just like, I just don't expose my children to that. I don't have any children, but if I had children, I just, right? But kids are going to do what they're going to do. And young men, if they're lost, it's a bigger question than with Andrew Tate, right? If young men are looking for something, you have to be the attractive force that they're trying to connect to, right? Because there's something attractive about somebody like Tate to these people. And so it's like, there are dudes out in that space who are doing it, but they're doing, and they have a massive platform, and they're doing it for the wrong reasons or the right reasons. And I'm just observing two forces approaching a situation, right? And so from different perspectives, but one is kind of, I don't care what I'm doing my thing. And then the other guys are, we need to save all these boys and young men. And it's interesting to watch that. But sorry, I derailed a little bit there. The whole point of doing the way that I do my show was to separate myself from selling something to dudes. That's really what it was. I didn't want to anchor myself in gun culture and weightlifting or meat eating and comic books. I have no idea.
Yes,
There's so many, but like, everyone has an agenda.
that's what I was trying to come to because a lot of what you said again is a lot of thing that's very cultural. So if you look at maybe 30, 40 years ago, before Andrew Tate was a thing, if you ask the same question, what is
Right.
being a man to you, it would probably be something completely different. It would probably be
Right.
something that's not even related to gun culture and
Right.
going to the gym and stuff. It could be takes and stuff like that. But it obviously changes depending on who your spearhead of that movement is for that time. And if you ask somebody who is a follower of Andrew Tate, their vision or their understanding of what masculinity and manhood is would be completely different than somebody who's been getting information from different sources. And that's why I also say culturally it's a lot different because like
Right.
here in the Europe, there's not much gun culture, so I think there wouldn't be much relationship with shoot guns and stuff with masculinity here, at least. But there would be other stuff for sure. So that's what it's just interesting how masculinity is perceived differently throughout the world.
And right, to your point, right? Because I guess I didn't even answer that part of the question, right? It's just going to evolve, right? And here, there is a subset of people, right, who would be left leaning, I would say, and still own firearms, and they just don't peacock with them, right? Because it's just like it's
Mhm.
another tool that they hope they don't have to use, right? And mostly in the right wings of it all, or even like centrist leftists who are just stuck in some I'm a man thing, and they're just peacocking with firearms, right? And it's just like,
Mm.
and we know that also in like gym bro world, right? Where you have the dudes who are just really aggressive, annoying, and just chest puffing all day. And a lot of it is
Yeah,
just like showboating, and it doesn't
yeah,
actually have any energy behind it outside of just peacocking. And if it
yeah.
does, then that's a different conversation. But
But I feel like a lot of this is also a counter, a retaliation behind the cancel culture, behind all of the masculine traits being not being hated on, but at least being overshadowed in pop culture by more homogeneous traits, let's say. For
I
a
think that
while,
was good.
no, go ahead, sorry.
You said at least for now, or is that what you said?
No, at least for a while in the past, this was going on, and I think at least now the anti-trait of today is happening because of this retaliation to this past retaliation to them, which they think happened.
Right, and I think that that should be expected, right? And because this isn't the first time this has happened, and I think that there's that whole notion of like history rhymes thing, but like I don't think anyone pays attention, and they only care about, well, this is the first time it's happened to me, right? So when people are experiencing it, it becomes more visceral. The idea that
Mm,
despite the fact that the world is infinitely more safe today than it was 40 years ago, people think that they're unsafe, right? And it's an illusion, right? Because it's not because they actually are not safe, it's because they feel unsafe. So the illusion of safety is not there for them. So they gravitate towards these things of safety, right? And so
yeah.
it should be expected that something like the Tate phenomenon, whether it's him or somebody else, would emerge in the world in response to the pacification of our environment, right? And in the United States specifically, it's very notable, palpable, and identifiable that like are a lot of soft and cowardly men in our world, and that's by virtue of the construct of our environment, right? And so when things become easier, there's less friction, right? And that's the whole point, right? And in doing so, there's been some emergence of uh, and situations and directions that a counterbalance that didn't exist. And what happens with what's the weirdest thing to me, because you're right about the response in the cult of personality in response to the vacuum of nonsense that exists, right? And in the pushback. But what I find the most interesting is you have a group of, and it's not just men, but like we'll just continue with the man thing here. Like a bunch of dudes who are quote man, right? They're the man, and but they're not courageous and virtuous, and they don't have direction. They will seek to a higher man to point the light. Like it's so weird, right? So you have all of these. It's like the movie 300, right? You
Yeah,
have all of these dudes, but without Leonidas, they don't nothing. They don't have direction,
yeah.
right? And so that's one of the weirdest things I've noticed because and it's something I never thought about. You have all of these dudes. I'm like, what's going on? It's like we don't have direction. We don't have good direction. But it's like when you look at the culture in recent history and the ideals, it's like, well, it's very clear that there's no direction. That's what we're throwing spaghetti at the wall and trying to see which side wins, right? There's no cohesiveness and there's no spearhead. There's no, it's where we're all heading, right?
So I feel like what you're trying to get at is that everyone should be having the same amount of, as Leonidas. They can't have that in a movie, but you shouldn't just be like blindly just following the leader. Some
Right.
kind of self-taught, and like even after the king falls, you should have the structure at least to keep going, and own personal reasons to keep going rather than because someone else told you to.
It should, right? No, and it should be that way during times when a very palpable vacuum and absence of strong leadership and sound leadership, right? When our biggest leaders and cultural influencers and role models are people who have an agenda to sell a product, that's not a recipe for good outcomes. And we can't, no one in the right mind is going to say that, right? Like, you're going to buy my special drink that I've made and I'm going to, click on this YouTube link and blah, blah, blah. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, I just don't want to call somebody out specifically, but like, you have a world of stars and TikTok stars and all, and these are the people who are influencing younger minds, right? And our older minds are influenced by people who are dissociated or upset about the way that the world is unfolding because of technology. So we have two battles going on for two different essentially worlds, at the same time, and everyone's trying to have a conversation and be on the same page, and it's just never going to happen because everyone's preoccupied with
Yeah.
their own cultural battles, their own worldview battles, and there's no direction. And the people who are supposed to be leading that they look up to are trying to rip money out of their pockets. It's a lost game.
Uh, yeah, just interesting. Just something you just said reminded me. Have you seen the podcast recently between Bernie Sanders and Joe Rogan?
No, I heard it was good though.
Yeah, and it was so interesting because of how they actually about a lot of things which Joe Rogan was really against, stuff like that. And at least for a lot of the actual nitty-gritty points of it, they actually came to a more or less an agreement. And that just goes to show how much there's actually like the understanding of terms are completely different in these like people.
Yeah, but like to me, the problem I was just outlining to you, to me, the answer is, and it doesn't have to be. I hate bringing this up because sometimes people just recoil from it immediately. Because I used to be the same way, and to me, the answer is God, but
Mm,
not in the sense of religion. To me,
mm,
it's a higher purpose. It's a higher power, right? Something outside of this world. It's a spiritual journey to me. It's always been, right? And so to me, it's something that if I put this goal at the end of this road that is my deathbed, and I'm always, that's my guiding light, and I'm going to say that that's God. That is my higher power, or that's something outside of this world, right? That I'm going to strive towards this ideal. And by the time I'm dead, I would have got closer or achieved it. And so when that's the guiding light, you still get lost in the sauce, man. Don't like sometimes I'm human, right? And I have an ego. And in
yeah.
the last 2 weeks, I've dealt with that, and it's been tumultuous, right? Like still human and still experiencing the same things that everyone else would, but I don't get lost in the day-to-day nonsense as much because, what it means to me and be a man doesn't matter because it doesn't matter to my God, right? Because to my God, it means important is if I'm doing the right thing or trying to do the right thing and I'm trying to not act like a coward and I'm trying to help people and whatever, if someone's going to call me a pussy, then it doesn't matter, right? Because they don't know
Yeah.
that I don't care and they don't know that whatever there is going on in their lives is their problem and I'm serving God. They don't know that I just helped somebody out today who might have killed themselves if they didn't get the help they needed, right? And or they don't know that I'm, my life in a certain way because of certain things, right? They don't know my life, right? And so it's like I'm serving something higher than myself, then I don't have to peacock over what's going on, right? Because I'm serving God and God's got the keys to the kingdom for me. And there's an alignment to make God happy. That's between me and God. It's a personal relationship, right? And you do that with anybody else, anyone you love who's a very personal relationship, right? Your partner, your spouse, like girlfriend, your boyfriend, your right, and you try to protect that no matter what, and it's because it sits outside of what you care about in the world, right? And it's important, and you attend to it differently. And in I think that people I'm not Christian, so the idea of the Garden of Eden is interesting to me because it's like heaven where people try to like this place, even in spirituality that or meditation, right? Like nirvana, they try to reach these places and they think that like places you go to and you never leave, and all it is state of being, right? And so you momentarily reach these states of being that are um, equivalent of Eden or heaven or nirvana, and people think that we're not supposed to stay there. You don't set a home there. You're supposed to visit and then fucking go home and remember that there's a place that's better than where you're at now, and if you do good, you can reach that place again. That's it.
Yeah. Coming to this idea about religion, right? So, what I try to say is that there's a line between religion and spirituality. And
Mm-hmm.
spirituality is something that's really individual to every person. So, if you would try to go and spread your kind of spirituality to other people, it turns into religion. So
Mm,
I feel like spirituality, like if someone else is telling you how to do your spirituality, how your God is, that's not real spirituality in any sense because no one else can actually be able to decide what God is to you. You
I
know,
agree.
and all these religions that exist is just one person who just tried to spread their idea of spirituality and succeeding to an extent.
Right. Yeah. And when I ask the question, it's like, well, what's the difference between that and your favorite influencer?
Yeah,
Same thing, right? In
yeah,
service of something that is less than the ideal, right? And so, like, to me, it's the agree 100% with what you just said, right? This is why I never preach to people about like my relationship personally with my higher power or what that is. It doesn't matter,
yeah,
right? It's like me telling you about what it feels like to a relationship with my girlfriend. It doesn't matter because it's not for you. It's for me. And so if
yeah,
somebody comes and says, "Hey, you look like you're doing a good job with your relationship. What is it that you do?" Well, that's a different story, right? And then we get into the world of like the things that like Anonymous got right with their thing. It's like promote that it's a program of attraction rather than promotion, right? They're not being like about it and going out there and spreading the message. They're just like better lives, and that it should be enough. When you're doing something right, that should be attractive, right? Because when the dude is peacocking a certain way and he's getting all the chicks, for those dudes that are listening and are still operating in machismo and manly world stuff, um, dudes are gonna ask like, "Hey, what is this guy doing?" Because he's doing something right. And then people who don't operate in that world go, "Why is Andrew Tate killing it out here?" It's like, why? Like, it's not a complicated formula, right? It's something that's happening, and it's the same thing
yeah,
that and that dudes are attracted to, or people are attracted to, and it's the same thing with religious aspect of it. I agree with you that uh or religious views or even just spiritual views down somebody's throat is not only it's counterproductive, but it's also in the service of religion, and it's kind of it's ego driven, right? Um, I'm very much I share things. For those who might not understand that there might be things out there on the show, we do cover like stuff, and but I don't know that I've ever kind of spirituality down people's throat. In the sense, you have to
mm,
do this. Like, I would never tell anybody that. You find your own path because it's going to work for you. Because nobody could tell me how to live my life, and then one day it just,
yeah,
I saw somebody who was doing something, and I was like, "How do you have your life together, man?" And he was like, "This is what I do." And I was like, "Awesome. I don't know that my way's been working, but yours seems to lead to good outcomes. I'm gonna try that." And sure as shit, right?
yeah. But again, see, the problem with religion again, my problem with religion again comes with its rigidity. Can't like I'd say that if I again came to that same situation, I'd be like, okay, method isn't working, so
Mhm.
I'd use yours and just take the best aspects of it and keep moving on to the next person and see what best aspects of their religion or whatever their life processes I can take and the positive aspects and then move along. With these set up religions and rules and stuff, you can't set up your own rules because you have to follow rules that's set up by someone thousands of years ago. So that's
Right.
my main issue with these historical religions.
Yeah, and I was you for like a long
Yeah.
time. It was really funny. I grew up Catholic, and then I was very much atheist after like 2 years old. Um, and I didn't believe in God. I didn't think there was anything out there. I was like, it's all a joke. Um, and I don't know what happened that I was like, well, maybe there's some spiritual aspect to this whole thing. Maybe there's something outside of this. It's not religious. Religion is very clearly just this weapon of abuse, right? It's an instrument of abuse, and it's an instrument of like funds from people and all these bad things that I thought. And then I just got really spiritual, and there's no real bounds to my connection. Connection with God is simple. It's me and my higher power, and I just do what I think is best in service of my higher power. That's it. There's no
Mm.
I couldn't name it for you. It's not complicated, right? It's just I know there's a God out
Yeah.
there. I don't something that governs the universe. It's not Jesus Christ as far as like a Christian God. It's not what's the Indian one?
Oh, Indians have
Um
so many. What are you talking about?
yeah, I know, but there's the main one. It's not one God face thing. Like, no offense to Jesus Christ and Allah and the Indian one that I didn't mention, but like, it doesn't matter. That's the point.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I think for myself, it was okay with like, hey, there's nothing out there. And then I
Yeah.
don't remember what happened, and then I started realizing that like on like deathbeds, like the most hard people who like that there's no God, the minute something happens where their life is in danger or like about to die or they're faced with some existential crisis for real, suddenly it's like, help me. It's like, that's weird. Why do you do that?
So
You didn't believe in
there's
God
two things.
until like happened, and now there's some so
Yeah.
like curiosity of like maybe there is something out there. Kind of my mind to exploring what a relationship with God without religion might be, and
So something I just wanted to say because it just came to me when you were talking
Mhm.
about that was like how interesting it is that at least when it comes to religion that we think that God has such a tangible form. Every religion
Right,
seems to assume that God has a human form or come down in human form or at least in a physical form of some
right,
kind, or at least for the second part, that God cares about us.
right,
Someone had the ability to create entire universes. Does it really care about what's happening in one tiny planet, in one tiny galaxy, in one tiny corner of space, in God knows how many universes that exist? So
right,
that's my question with religion in a higher sense that, like, if a God exists, and even if that God isn't, an energy or something that doesn't have consciousness, then what is to say that they actively care about us? What is to say that us calling to them on their deathbed, even if they exist, they
right.
care about us in any way, shape, or form?
Yeah, and just to wrap up on the religious aspect of it, I really think that the religious part of it all is just a flavor of ice cream, man. Like, it's another filter. It's another Instagram filter, right?
Yeah.
It's just church, right? In a sense of community. And it's how so like in spirituality, just generally speaking, my connection with whatever higher power thing that I want to connect with, that's a personal thing. No one's ever going to take that from
Mm,
me. I can literally be in a pit somewhere. I can be in the pit of hell, and my connection with God will not erode. It's between me and God. That's it. And then the way
yeah.
like you and I are doing here, that's religious. That's church. That's how you and I celebrate higher power together, right? It's
Mm,
two or more people coming together. That's religious, right? That's and the ceremonial aspects of it, right? Make it religious. And those are just a thing that people do so that they can all honor something that they all agree upon together, right? When the family comes together for dinner, that's religious, right? Uh,
yeah.
people get together for holidays, right? That's religious, right? It's just a thing people do in honor of something and they carry reverence with it. That's it, right? And the point is to do it together in reverence, right? And so
Yeah.
I think once I kind of that that's my perspective, right? Um, you know, I disagree with me, and that's fine. It helped me stop taking so much offense to people's attitudes and um, will towards service in that direction, right? Um, to the other point, freed me is what it did from the shackles of the things where like there's no God, and it's like, well, then why am I so stuck on this question about God?
Mm,
If I'm so convinced, why am I so stuck on it? Right? And this was the same thing with the manhood thing, right? It's like there's no men anymore, and like it's just like stupid thing that we all just talk about. It's like, then why am I so stuck on this? Like because I have a problem with men. And I have a relationship with men is not right in the sense that like I don't know how to operate as a man in the world because of my own insecurities, and so I have to explore that by talking to men,
mm,
right? And it's like I have an understanding that there are different types of men out there in the world that my heroes look like, and I operate more like that. But those guys don't seem to be bothered with these questions because they're asking bigger questions. So am I insecure, or am I just looking at the world through a different lens? And I'm just uh, about my own understanding about men. And so I don't know. Let's find out. Let's ask questions. Now, on the other aspect of this is to me, because everything is some symbolic interaction with people in the world and all these things, that does not stop the minute we get into the world of spirituality, right? And so I myself have asked the question of like, well, surely God does not care about me, right? And I can tell you a million and one things that like it's God, maybe it's a code. I don't know, man, right? Like, is a higher intelligence or a higher even if that higher intelligence is just the mere coincidence that keeps on happening and unfolding, or my attitude or perspective towards the world, whatever that may be, there's something that keeps happening that makes me go, "What the hell is going on? Am I in a simulation?"
yeah.
right? And so
See,
if I'm in a
but
simulation, is there no capacity for God? And if God is my system, does it matter if I call
yeah,
it a system or my God? Right?
yeah.
And then
So,
we're
but
talking about like
again, my
this.
was just my second part of that, which I again came back to, was why do you think that the God actually cares about you?
Right. Well,
Which I think is the
that's my
basis
point.
for a lot of these religions, that if you pray to us, the God will send you to heaven, or you'll be reborn better, or karma will favor you in some way or the other. That kind of give that all requires on this fact that God cares about us as human beings in some fact.
Yeah,
So
wave function collapse hack. That's it, right? Because when you're putting effort towards something you care about, fruit is bared.
yeah.
You get rewarded,
Mm,
right? And so if the illusion is God loves me, and if I love God more, he'll give me more love. Why wouldn't you do that?
mm,
Right? Because if it's something different, like I go tend to my garden harder and pay more attention to it, I will get more fruit and more vegetables and more whatever. That's true. Maybe, right? And sometimes it doesn't. And then you shift your approach and then until it does. Right. But when you're in service to something to such an extent that you're willing to put more attention, time, and effort into it, it's going to surely play out a little bit different and have more meaning in your life and take precedent over other things. Um, so to the question of like what God would care about me, just generally speaking, overall, it's like needs me, whether that's great AI of the world that needs me to be an observer so that it can understand itself. And I think that ultimately the question is God is trying to understand itself, whatever that
mm,
is. If it's an AI system, its only function is to understand itself. Right. And now we're into the world of like art with a hand drawing the hand thing. Right. And it's like,
yeah.
there's right. So which one came first, the chicken or the egg? And it's like, well, God is trying to understand itself. Surely he's going to need observers because if he's trying to observe everything that is everything and all in real time, and we're all aspects of God, then we are just a mere like for him to understand perspective and of different types, right? And so you and I are technically the same. To me, you and I are technically the same person, right?
Mm,
And I'm having a conversation with you, and you think I'm having a conversation the opposite way around, right? Like you are having a conversation with me, I'm having a conversation with you, and really what's happening is God is just having a conversation with himself to understand both sides of this thing.
mm.
And so,
That's
like
basically
people
how
feeding stuff into
that's
an AI
basically
machine,
yeah, basically how knowledge is formed, created, and also how evolution happens to an
right?
extent, right? So, so in a larger scale, that's basically evolution in process. Getting smarter, we're getting more conscious, we are getting smarter in general compared to million years ago. Life in general is smarter. So I consider all life to be God in general, then each one of us to be one tiny aspect of this one larger aspect, which is life and which is God. Then I guess in a way we are just trying to get and more knowledgeable to a point where we're able to understand ourselves, our own existence, which is our existence as to why life exists and why us as God exists.
One of the things that's then why there was a it seems like this recursive redundant like is the constant observer effect. Like I just don't know what it's in service to, right? And I had this conversation with somebody else on my show. I just never released the episode. Um, it was a good conversation about all of this stuff and specifically, and it's like there was a um again, I'm not Christian, but in the book of Daniel, there's this. I think it was the book of Daniel. There's a description of like kingdom, and they described a cherubim and that cherubim was covered in eyes, like right. And it's like, what would that be the description of it? And it's like, well, it's right. It's an observer. You need an observer to understand that reality is happening and to collapse the wave functions, right? And all things are possible, and right. And if you have no observer, then it never manifests to reality, right? And so you need multiple observers to consolidate and agree upon a reality that's happening, right? Otherwise, everything's in constant flux and chaos, right? And so the only way that we have some kind of agreement is because you and I are observing this moment. Otherwise, no one knows we're doing it, and we're back into like the Schrodinger's cat of it all.
Yeah,
Who knows right now that we are having this podcast? How I don't
yeah,
even know that you're real on the other end, right? I could
yeah,
be talking to AI, and then it's like, well, did I have that conversation? It's like I don't know,
yeah.
and
Well,
it's
AI
like
is a different story altogether.
same story to me. right? Because
We never
it's
had that kind of problem in the past. Years ago, you never had that kind of fear that if I was talking to somebody, it could be you be a human at least.
right. But what is the difference between that and a liar?
Um,
Then
well,
the
at
label.
least the liar has a personal liability to some aspect. And from a machine, I feel like it's just way more. Yeah, I feel like at least if it was coming from a
Unknown.
human being, I'd be able to trust it a
Right.
tiny bit more. You know?
It's intangible, a realm of spirituality. Would you not call that a demon? Do you see what I'm saying? Like just making shit up, right? And we're just adding labels to things where they feel appropriate, right? And we can both agree that it's something like or extra like about something that kind of in the ether that has the potential to cause harm, right? And some in religious aspects or context, someone would call that a demon, right?
Mm,
Uh, and right. And so like just when you tie it back to like the religious aspect and the spiritual aspect of it all, it's just terms that we use for certain things. And to me, there's no difference, right? So people get lost in like falling apart, and it's like, but what is the difference between now and 100 years ago? You're dealing with the same
yeah,
things, right? It doesn't matter to me whether the lie is coming from a machine or a person. The lie still has the
yeah,
capacity to affect whatever outcomes that it's trying to affect. And if it's achieving them, that's a problem. And if it's not, why is this existing? Right?
yeah.
Right? People will tell you it's so hard to live today and like you pay enough and um hard in America you'll get it like, oh, the American dream's dead and like you can't buy a house anymore on a job, blah, blah, blah. Get all of this stuff. And then if you go back and they'll tell you to your face with a straight face, they'll tell you, hey, it was way better back in the day. Right before technology, or even before that, a man used to be able to like. And it's like, okay, explain the Great Depression to me. Why were there hundreds and thousands of men? Why were there thousands of men like some bread lines trying to get a handout? You think those were prouder men back then, even, right? Changed, right? Nothing has
But
changed.
I feel like at least from now and then, I think the issue that we have now more than ever is the consolidation of wealth in a small number of people. Like in the past, it's always been an issue to an extent, even when there were kings and stuff and there was monarchy. It was never as bad as it is today, actually. The wealth in difference, I think it's 1% has like 60% of the wealth of the
Yeah.
US or something, which is crazy if you think about it.
And
And
I think about that a lot. I used to get fired up about that, right? And then I was really on this train of things are unequal and there's so much injustice and inequality in the world and we need to do something about it. And then Occupy Wall Street happened and it's like, all right, we're finally, the world's changing. They've opened their eyes to it. And then the Tea Party cucked itself and rolled into the Republican Party. And was it the Republican Party? And I don't remember. And then there's when we
yeah,
so and that was brought up the Arabs, right? And
yeah,
we have these moments in where like George Floyd thing where we realize that there's this that we've all kind of been we need to deal with it, and then enough energy gets put into dealing with it, and then the right people get paid off, and it's done. And it's like, this is crazy. We must not care about it that much, or something. I don't know what's going on, right? And the people who are left caring about it still are left with this massive wound that won't ever get healed, right?
mm,
And I try to understand like what I can do as a person to kind of knock that, and it's like, yes, we live in a world where there's a ridiculous amount of greed, and we might not have kings, but wealth is very much consolidated to a very wood, right? And it's like, what are you supposed to do about that? And it's like, nothing. Like, right? Live your life to the best that you can, because shouting at these people to change is not going to change it, right? And
yeah,
if what we need is people to engage in politics to change their political outcomes in their environment, then that's what they have to do. But most people are unwilling to do that, right? If that means that people start opening businesses and offering people decent wages, right? Then they do that. But most people are unwilling to do that because they quickly realize that this shit is a lot harder than they think, right?
hmm,
And that these things, even though it doesn't take a hyper intelligent person to operate a lot of these mechanisms in the world, that it is still takes somebody who's willing to put up the nonsense and and all of them's with it. And most people are just too like lazy and to do it. Otherwise, they would just do it. And every now and then you get somebody who stands up and tall and says, "No, fuck this. We're going to change it." And that is Joan of Arc, right?
Yeah.
That is somebody who is willing to die for something that is higher than themselves to right a wrong, right?
Mm.
And to lead into battle with truth and for the sake of justice and to change the outcome of this, right? Despite what may happen to you, right? And the extreme version of that, we know what that looks like. That's not good. We don't want that at all, right? That's how we end up with like 9/11. So there's
Mm.
this temperance in the world that must happen, and it's like to your like, well, is it right that there's this 1% that gets to hold the wealth? It's like no, it's not, right?
Yeah.
Right? There's this other part of it where it's like there's a bunch of stuff in the world that have got infinitely better, and we're still dealing with hunger in the world, right? It's
Yeah.
silly, right? And when
I,
have we
I
not dealt
just
with that?
I just can't comprehend how countries can, still behind money on, space, rockets and defense when they still have, people in the streets in their own country, I shouldn't the priorities first be, give everyone living in your country a basic human, life, and then go into, spending stuff like building and missiles and to shoot down your enemies and stuff. Like the priorities are like as a country and for most countries are just really off.
Yeah, I think that also, and sometimes I still do. I mean, like the way that she did because she suffered for the mission that she was on, right?
Mm,
And it was like Mother Teresa died a billionaire, right? She wasn't Nancy Pelosi, right?
yeah.
Like she didn't her pockets with cash to feed and save hungry children, right? And on this mission
Yeah.
that she was on, she suffered tremendously for it. And I think that people forget that in the pursuit of what you think is righteous, you're going to suffer. And so one of my favorite sayings is, if we acknowledge the which comes from suffering, if we acknowledge the love which comes from suffering, then pain is never seen as a punishment. Right. So if we acknowledge the love which comes from suffering, then pain is never seen as a punishment. We choose our pain. We choose our suffering. We choose what we're willing to die for. And when it's then it doesn't feel as terrible because you're doing it in service of love, right? When you're doing it for your higher power, it doesn't feel like you're in a cult. And it doesn't feel like you're being dumb with a bunch of people in a room and doing these dumb things. And when you're Teresa and you're saving uh one hunger, right? It like a stupid mission that you have nothing with. You don't have any wealth. You don't have a home. You don't have a car. Mother Teresa didn't have a Bugatti, but I guarantee
Yeah.
she died, happier than people in the world would ever dream of, right? Because she was doing what
Yeah.
she wanted to do. And I don't just keep putting like these religious into this. It's just that like people who are on the journey are they're actually out there doing it. They're not around talking about the what ifs of it all. They're just doing it, right? And that we wrap that back to that's the component of it, right? If you want to seek that relationship with your higher power or the world and leave that kind of good in the world, you just do that and you go hang out with Mother Teresa, right?
Mm,
And so else is just a low barrier to entry access point for everybody to kind of achieve that they are Mother Teresa,
yeah.
right? And so it's not that most people want to change the world; they just want to feel like they do. And this is why I'm saying that the 300 without King Leonidas are nothing,
Yeah.
right? Just
Yeah.
you has the same power for the most part, right? And especially when the world is literally an illusion of handshakes. At the end of the
Mm,
day, everyone is just flesh and bone,
mm,
right? And it sometimes goes off the rails, and that's and stuff that like the world and history have known, right? And those are just bad outcomes. And we need somebody who's gonna do that, and we need more people who are going to be uh, engaging in the environment, in the politics, in the world of schooling, in the world of psychology, in the world of doctor, in the world of well, you name it, right? The grocery store. Like we need people who are looking at their environment and their role and their capacity in their communities and say, hey, I care. I care what I'm doing for my sake because of my relationship with my principles, morals, and ethical. And I care about how I'm going to bag this person's groceries today. Um, And I don't care that there's a self checkout machine because those things are fucking stupid. I'm gonna do a thing here because there's a person in front of me and I see them and I see them to see me. And for a moment, they're gonna things have gotten weird in the world, but there's a human standing in front of you, and I see your humanity, and I appreciate this moment that I'm having with you. And it's silly to think that we operate
I
that
feel
way.
like I feel like
Yeah.
in that example, the guy is probably just thinking, "Oh, I wish that guy's just gone to the self checkout so I didn't have to bag his groceries." I feel
Right.
like that's a
Right, but then fundamentally speaking, right? It's like no one should like think that way 24/7. Even on my best like spiritual days, I'm thinking like that all the time, right? And sometimes I have moments where I'm like, oh man, like God is on the world. Like there's no way there's not a God. And then there's other times where I'm like, this is all joke, right? And it's not a constant. It's just a temperance. And if we're kind of in the middle of those things, and then you're bringing up is like the Hobbesian view of the world, right? That and you can't do anything about that. And you just have to let, people be who they are. And it's like if we argue about every or try to deconstruct every individual's possibility of perspective and engagement in the world, then it's a lost battle for sure. So because to your point of like, should I feed my neighbor in lieu of going to space? I know why the answer is no, especially in the United States, where like you have access to almost anything you want, right? And I've known people who literally had nothing and became millionaires. There's a guy I
mm,
interviewed, right? Millionaire, quiet millionaires, right? And it's
mm,
like at some point, because I deal with even like in the world, like I've where you see examples of people who do a job and then they like their job's outlined a certain way and like blah blah blah. But like at some point you give a job that's and then it still has to be easier, right? And so one of the greatest books I've ever read in the world was I was like I think I was like 7 years old, 6 years old. It's called If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. Um, and
mm,
basically it's like if you give a mouse a cookie, he's gonna want a glass of milk. If you give him a glass of milk, he's gonna want a nap, right? And it just it keeps there's no end nonsense, right? And so um, there is some level of autonomy and agency that must be
mm,
exercised. There's a responsibility that an individual has to themselves to make shit happen for themselves, right?
mm,
I can't make a cancer patient take the medicine, right?
mm,
They at some point they must be them the will to live. And if you do not have the will to live and to go forward, it is no one's business but your own to do what you will with that, right?
mm,
And that applies to myself, right? And as somebody
mm,
who has been homeless and not homeless and done well and done very bad and everything in between, I assure you that if anybody wants to change their circumstances in the United States, they can. And if they want to make excuses so that they don't make those changes, they will find them.
mm. I completely agree on a lot of that aspects, but what I don't get especially when it comes to just basic stuff like healthcare, like why
Mm-hmm.
is why leaving that to be that you have to, like having it like healthcare, these are the you basically need to survive, right? So I feel like
Yeah.
living in a world where these aren't, secured in one way or the other, you're always constantly, running behind ways, try to get done, trying to thrive as a person, and that's why are coming from more well-off situations have it easier because they don't have to keep running behind their basic needs, so they have the time to, actually thrive and time on building businesses or building relationships and connections and building whatever they actually want to do, figuring out what they actually want to do because they aren't bound by trying to get by day in and day out because they have some kind of security in life.
Gotcha. The thing with that, I mean, there's so many, globally speaking, right? And there's still areas in the world, and talking about like the global South areas and stuff, right, where there's just like no access to healthcare, and the outcomes to that are pretty adverse. As we start looking at like women, right? That healthcare, no access to healthcare and healthcare services affects in those countries. It's pretty gnarly. So it's even in like we don't common or a shared um, understanding of what the healthcare system might look like, right? And I think I can only say like the U.S., right? Because every country's going to have their own thing. Um, our shit's a mess for sure, right? And
Yeah.
um, it's you. There's made all kinds of things in service to one side or another, and it's like I don't think it fixed, right? And so then to me, it's like, well, what does it want to accomplish? And it's if it's healthcare for me, then what is the most advantageous way of me achieving healthcare, and is it possible for me to achieve healthcare? And I know a lot of people who have or like low income who actually strive for a higher paying job or higher monetary circumstances. The minute that they make a dollar over a certain limit, all of their services go away and they don't have access to their healthcare or to, other assistance and make more money being poor than they do if they were making good money. It's bizarre. And a really system that we have that incentivizes poor people to stay
Yeah.
poor. I don't think it's on purpose. I think looking at spreadsheets doesn't see an individual circumstance and a human behind it, right? And and
See,
I
but
think
I,
that's
I
a lot of
feel
the fears with
like,
the AI stuff.
but can I just say, a lot of people who use this as a reason to, complain that a lot of people want to stay lazy are also the same people who are against universal basic income when it's literally been shown to be the solution to this. Because when you give people money with no strings attached, saying that you need to not have a job to keep getting this money or whatever, like then people can actually go to university and have a job or something. It's the strings that causing this issue, but it's the same people who are also people are staying jobless to get the uninsurance benefit, the benefit. Are there also the same people who are against universal basic income? Because and it really doesn't sense to me, because it's literally the issue that you seem so fixated on.
Which ones are the ones that are against it?
So, like you said, people staying in, and not getting job. So that's
Mm.
basically because their benefits are cut off. Because it's basically they get the benefits or strings that unless you start making a certain level, that your benefits are cut off, right? So the
Right.
idea is you just give the benefits to everybody, universal benefits to
Oh,
income to
gotcha.
everybody,
Right.
but people who are usually against this is also usually against that. So I mean, kind of is.
Yeah. Well, I know in that specific argument, and I know that like we have situations where the ideas of like healthcare or UBI, these things kind of come in, and heard arguments on both sides, and I've literature in general is comparative with like developed nations or even developing nations, and it's like it just can like there's no if the let's make everyone let's solve this for everybody. It's a fool's errand. The
Mhm.
outcome can't be an absolute one, and so when we're doing things in service to like, well, can we help people than not, and and if the answer is no, then don't even rock the boat. And that seems like a lame way to approach it, but um, I universal healthcare is, and then I'll talk to somebody who lives in a country that has it, and they're like, it's not that great. It takes me forever to get mediocre health and have to wait like a month or two, and it's like that's not appealing because you know just last weekend I went all I had to do is walk in, right?
Yeah.
If I want to go see a doctor, all I do is walk in and I hand them my card and that's it, right? And I can acknowledge that somebody who honestly didn't have health insurance like my whole life, there's a responsibility on myself to not be unhealthy, right?
Yeah.
And I don't approach I need healthcare first. I approach that from like, am I eating like, am I smoking, am I drinking, right?
Yeah.
Am I doing a realm of exercise to help me and my body? Am I doing anything in my spiritual world or spiritual practice or whatever? you know,
Mm.
my Zen, whatever I might have, right? In my all areas of my life, am I taking care of myself so that I don't have to worry about healthcare, right? And it's saying, and from your
Okay,
yeah,
but
no, but that's different. Like to me, it's this because if ultimately the goal is to care for an individual myself, right? And as
yeah.
an individual and for myself. I just encourage people to be more selfish and to really stop worrying about the world around them and worry about their selves and how they're taking care of themselves. What is necessary to ask the questions like, hey, is there a way for me to like accomplish my goal with my given circumstances, assuming they're not going to change, right? And then
Mm.
if I'm so the outside world, then I just approach it like a Mother Teresa situation, right? Because if I have a job that gives me 20 grand a month, it's just crazy like example, right? And I only need 5 grand a month to live. Then why don't I just give the 15 grand a month away so that people can have whatever I'm trying to gift in the world? And it's like no one's gonna do that because people are actually selfish assholes who are actually we
Yeah,
all are, right? No
yeah,
one is out giving all of the resources away so that they can help another human being on the same topics that they're complaining about, right?
yeah,
Because it's not that into them. Because if it was, they would just do the thing that they were doing, right? Instead, you would just turn into Mother Teresa or Joan of Arc. But most
yeah,
people don't because they don't actually care about that much. They just want to sound like Bernie Sanders.
yeah.
It's like Sanders is everyone's spirit animal when it comes to having conversations about in the world. No offense to Bernie Sanders.
I mean, it's real to get made, but I think just when it comes to at least insurance, at here how it works here in the UK is that even though we have, general public insurance, free, do have, privatized levels on top of it, and also, I mean, just so like the countries that you are paying for in the US, you can also pay for it here. They do have, but I think the idea with giving everybody free healthcare and insurance is that you bring everybody from the bottommost level back up to, at least that they can function without having to, worry about breaking and stuff like that and getting and losing their entire savings.
Yeah, I promise you though, in the United States, are no offense, I used to be one of them. Um, People who are poor, like their health insurance, most people who are not, like I'm not saying rich people. I mean like they don't thing where like people who are low like
Yeah.
they don't worry about taken care of. Their insurance is the state takes care of it. The Fed takes care of it. Like they get taken care of. They don't have to worry about it. Emergency bills, they don't worry about it. It's the minute that you get out of that, right? And so it's like what you trade lose in security of benefits, right? And so it's not that this lower working right that seems to really struggle because they're in no man's land, right? So
Mm.
from a US perspective, the thing would to do would just to like kind of include them by poverty level, right? And where we would manage that. But it's like and that's just like a really rough like suggestion. Right? It's probably like the worst approach. I have no idea. I'm just saying like for this example, like you would just include them that they can stop suffering, and because the people above that line seem to be doing all right on all fronts, right? They're not like doing they're not in this limbo where they make too money to benefit from the services that we offer and that are on the table, but they don't make enough to get out of that, and so that they can't actually go one way or the other, right? And so if you just include them in one category or the other, then it helps the situation relieve it, that problem. And I'm sure there's other problems, right? But like
See,
people,
but I think this again came back to what I was trying to explain, that this entire situation is built on the fact that okay, that a certain that amount of income you lose you're basically your free. You said, people who are in the lower earning class, they free healthcare because the state takes care of them. So if you were to, simply expand this free the rest of, society, then immediately the, not having to go societies because you lose access is gone. So people's, apprehension to grow. So the easiest solution to this itself is to give everybody free healthcare.
oh, gotcha. I see what you're saying. It's not just gotcha. Right.
Yeah.
Just blanket it a minimum level. Right.
Yeah.
I think that just fundamentally speaking, that would increase our taxes 100%, and that would also open the door um to changing the way that those healthcare services operate.
Yeah, it would be but also, I mean, the US is literally the well-off country that have universal healthcare. It just fuels something that should have been done years ago at this point. because a lot more trying to incorporate it as their countries are growing. It feels like the US, instead of trying to move towards it, moving further and further away from having a nationalized health.
And I mean, to me, it's a because it's the same with like UBI. I don't actually care one way or the other. I just don't. I My biggest thing is like people have access to shifting their circumstances or access to resources that they need. They need them, and if the answer to the yeah, then I don't care which way it goes. Right. I don't think that a situation where if because if there's an emergency now for somebody and
Yeah.
they go to the hospital, right? That's to me, if you don't need to go to the hospital, you're not an emergency, right? And so then the argument really becomes about preventative care and about women's health, right?
Mm,
And um those two are different, I think. Because if it's an
mm,
emergency and I don't have insurance, I go to the hospital and it is what it is. And then we're having about something else, which is do I have money to pay for it? And if I don't, you can't squeeze blood out of a stone. So good luck. And if I do, then I have to pay for it. And if it's something that is going to, you know, bankrupt me, then it's like if I have a job, then there's a high likelihood that I had insurance. And if I don't have a job, then it doesn't matter.
yeah. I mean,
And
I
it's like not down the road because it like eventually like it has to get, but like there's so many these things that like it's I don't for the
it,
I don't care one way or the other.
yeah. I mean, it American healthcare system is kind of on on something. The fact really unsolid, and it's working, but no one really knows how it's going on, and really wants to touch it because they don't really know how it's gonna fall, how it's gonna work out. No one wants to because it's working so far, so just want to let it go how it's been going on far. I feel like that's
Yeah.
the situation you guys are in.
Yeah, no, and I think that just speaking, if something's been kind of moseying along for something, anybody, especially like a monstrosity or monstrous like healthcare, no one will fix that. That's crazy. It's gonna be so
Yeah.
expensive to do that, right? And it's easy to just grass is on the side kind of deal, right? Where it's all because if we put down like neighborhoods and neighbors and like oh yeah my neighbor like oh yeah like you gossiping like that his lawn. It's like yeah, but like you know, yours better, right? And it's like, well, I have this data, and it's like, yeah, but like, what are we? Right? Every time we're doing comparative stuff, it's like we're measuring different things. The narrative that we like ultimately get is the one that news pumps out based on an agenda and a framing, and it's like that's not helpful, right? So like, what is it that we're trying to actually fix, right? Because when I can only tell you stories about people who tell me things about other countries who have universal health care, for instance, right? It's like it's so far not that great, and from what I've seen, not that great. And it's like if the goal is say everyone is holding a card that they can that says, "Hey, you have free healthcare," and it's got a thumbs up on it, then okay, cool, mission accomplished. But to me, it's not worth having whatever it may be, right? Like universal basic income, whatever. We're gonna give everyone $1,000 a month, and now my dollar's worth 50 cents because of it. I don't want that. Why would I want that?
Mhm.
No one would want that.
Okay.
Right? Because
So
then we're just injecting more nonsense into a game just to say that we did it, right? And then it becomes that it loses its value or meaning or intent, and it just becomes watered down. And if we're going to subsidize everything with, then let's just subsidize it in service to the process that already exists, which is what the U.S. is.
yeah, so I agree with you on a lot of stuff, but I think when you're looking at just healthcare, right, you can't think of having a free market just like every other thing, like even the basic requirements like and housing and stuff like that. Because when you look at it this way, right, you still have to pay for healthcare even if you die, even if like if you've admitted you're something, and even if they got it wrong and they did a million tests on them and they gave them a million drugs and they still didn't treat it, you still have to pay them the bill. So I think that's where the issue comes. My issue comes with healthcare, especially, is that when you turn it that's a for-profit institution, their profits are increased by not by getting you cured, because would mean less in the hospital, but by rather doing as many tests as they can, giving you as many medicines as you can, because even if you way that they're getting money off of these insurance is by putting you through the most number of tests and giving you the most number of medicines and stuff, assigning you like therapy and stuff like that, because they can write this off your insurance, because that's how they get paid from the insurance too, right? So I feel like any way that that you create for healthcare, at least, causes the detriment of the patient. Because if you look at it in the other side, like if it is a universal, at least, so if you go to a hospital, the doctors are basically like, I need to treat this person as the best I can, as soon as I can, so I can get to the next person, because I'm not getting paid for getting them through as much as possible, but rather as many. I just want to treat as many people as I can, because I'm getting a paid a fixed rate. Like, nevertheless, the incentives.
Yeah, I get it. And I'm telling you, man, I used to when Hurricane Katrina happened, I was like, in like 9/11 happened, and I was down of like, oh my god, everything's a lie. I had no idea. Like I was asleep. This is really nuts. And then like I kind of got I didn't it was like I was like playing a massive joke on me, and I was the only one. No, I didn't know that the world operated this way, and I felt pretty unhappy, and um, and that just kind of up to like the Wall Street thing, and like, all right, finally someone's doing something about this. Like that was kind of like of that tens for me, right? The 20 odds, and it's like, and now like the things that you're explaining right now, those are things and topics that I was like, okay, there's these people, right? Because we all this in the news, right? And somebody thought that there was this massive injustice, and his solution was to exercise violence over a CEO because of massive profits based on fair outcomes. It's like I think that people forget, and it gets lost on them, that like, yeah, maybe the guys up top, very end, right? The very end, counting all the money, they get to divvy it up the way that they want to. But largely speaking, everybody beneath that, right? When I go to a hospital, I know the doctor cares. And I know when I'm seeing a doctor that they're not sitting there worried about, how many ways can I have insurance? They have people who are billing insurance for them, right? And maybe those people are doing that. I don't think all of them, right? And so my point is like, are there in the world who operate from a like a nasty uh, right? And just coming at this from greed and how do I fuck this person? Like most people who operate like aren't actually in healthcare. They're probably more in construction, to be honest. But like, um, and in the industry, people who operate like that, yes, they are 100%. I know there are, right? And are there doctors who are not actually looking out for the best interest of their patients and are actually just trying to line their pockets? Yes, there are 100%. There are, right? Is it 100% across the board of all doctors? No, it's not, right? But then, you know, is every right? So it's the conspiracy of um, everybody involved in a healthcare system inspired to fuck the patient out of their money so that everyone can have a yacht. And it's like that's not what happened. It's not the truth of it. And when I go to the doctor, I know people who are like sad about the doctor and they think that they're working for big pharma, and like it's it's like, then why, right? And so there has to be so many parts to this, right? And like ultimately to me, it's like most people don't aren't happy at job anyways. They don't care that much about their job. And it even in healthcare, unfortunately. And that's why you have situations where, malpractice lawsuits happen, right? And it's also these checks on the way up in service to the profits, right? And all we see is like the big CEO with the yacht and profits and the $3 million bonus and this stuff. And it's like there's so many other things that happen before it, right? And it's not to justify those things. I don't enjoy seeing people make large money off the suffering of others. Like that's not what I'm justifying. Like that
Yeah.
is something that should be corrected, right? But to blame the doctors and the healthcare workers, the nurses, and the volunteers, even who the hospital aisles and try to up, right? Hospice volunteers who go see people in their dying, and it's like I know that there's human beings in these spaces because they can't all be devils, right? And everybody there is
Mm.
in service to trying to extract resources and monetary value out of a life. I think that there's people trying to do good things, and unfortunately, part of that is an exchange of funds. And maybe we don't like the way that that happens, but I don't. I think that there's like rip people off at every step of the way, and there are legal mechanisms to combat that of the way too, right? It's not a one way street. So what happens mostly is like it's like the Wizard of Oz, where you pulled back the curtain and it's like there's no power actually, right? And so the minute that people start about like the mechanisms and the way that they operate to the full extent, it's like, oh, it's just a misunderstanding actually. I understand that there was these other things that actually played in, right? Because if you have recourse as an individual, if you feel ripped off and you feel like you're just a number as a patient, you have recourse for that legally, right? And so do most people know that? No, they don't. They actually don't know that, right? You feel like a doctor has you in some way, then you have legal recourse, right? It's not a one way street, and then they have to tiptoe around that too, right? There's states in the doctors are to come by because of the with the malpractice policies and laws are in place, right? So some doctors there's shortage of doctors because they're not protected, and so it goes both ways, right? And the healthcare industry doesn't have anything to say with that. And then you see where the healthcare industry steps in to kind of persuade those things one way or the other. You have the people and persuade those things one way or the other. And what ends up happening is you have this battle in the political realm that people see, and they think that there's an agenda. And like, yes, there is, because people have to make so that things get done in the world. And if they don't, like, it doesn't get done. And so it's easy, it's a particularly interesting level of entitlement that kind of unfolds where it's like, I'm just some random person in the world and I'm seeing that this guy just bought a yacht and he works for this healthcare place and here I am struggling. Fuck this guy. Right. And it's such a cool narrative for somebody who feels that way. But that's not the entire story. Right. And some poor guy
Mm.
loses his life because somebody felt hurt and unheard. And
Yeah.
and it's like it goes both ways. And if there's empathy from the side that feels hurt and unheard, approach it with good faith, then there's no point because the outcomes are going to be the same.
Yeah. I mean, that's quite interesting. We've really gone through topics. I mean, we started off with mental health and we went all the way to, religion and spirituality to this. I mean, an interesting conversation we've had. So,
Yeah,
to bring it to a close, just a few last questions that we
sure.
try to ask everybody. So what are your tips or tricks, or just something that you do to just get yourself through your day in today's day and age? Because I mean, we all know it's a lot. It's just to get some days. So how do you do it personally?
I try to remind myself that I'm human. I mean, to all the points that we were right, I'm one person,
Yeah.
and and you are doing an awesome question. Ask questions. I do it all the time. Ask questions. Question everything that I thought about my life and who I am. Like, do I really like that? Is vanilla really my favorite ice cream? Ask the question. It's stupid. Ask it. Find an answer. Right? There's a lot of injustice in the world, a lot of craziness in the world, and there's a lot of things that one can get lost in. And if you really believe in whatever it is, then find truth towards that. But um, there's a be word to be no matter where it's at. Um, and I think that ultimately for myself, really kind of approaching it from a sense of um, the battle I want to battle. Is this just an opinion? And really, it's just constantly reminding myself I make mistakes, and it's okay to fail, and then get up and trying again. Choice, and that ultimately I
Mm.
do have autonomy, and that whether I do something or don't do it is a choice, and that there's always a choice, and that I think the serenity prayer is honestly probably the most solid um like mini guide for me, and it's like goes, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And like that's it. And that, I mean, that you don't have to be religious, right?
Yeah.
Because you can talk to yourself about it. Today, I'm going to do the best I can to accept the things that I can't do anything about, and that I can do something about, like be a better human. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do, and then
Yeah.
And then every day I'm going to make it to
Work on that
understand.
one.
Yeah, right? It doesn't have to be complicated, right? And
Yeah.
it's gonna feel like a mountain sometimes. Hills feel like mountains sometimes. And then when you're on top of those mountains, you're gonna realize that they weren't that big. And then you're gonna kind of used to it, and then you find yourself on top of a really big mountain, and you can say, "Holy shit, how did I get here?" And it's gonna be crazy. And I think
Yeah.
this ultimately it's a sense so that when I'm on my deathbed, it's like I'm like I look back, I'm like, well, I didn't just sit there
Mm.
like a cuck and just participate in whatever else I participate in and accept everyone else's truth. I asked the
Yeah.
questions and I lived my life for myself.
Mm. That's really interesting. So, any last words? Anything that you want to end off by? Also, I mean, I do that you do. That's how we met. But anything else that you want to shout out that you're working on?
Um, no. Honestly, I want to thank you so much for having me on. I think that
Oh,
you have an interesting perspective, and um, you are working on some very exciting things. And I wish you the best of luck on not only the Mind on the Rocks podcast, but also with your app. I think that's infotech. I think watching something like that does is really fascinating, and you seem to be getting some traction on it. But ultimately, just I wish you the best of luck on your journey. Um, and as far as my stuff, you can check out, Stag at stagpod.com, and we're just talking to dudes until I get bored. I
hopefully that doesn't happen anytime soon.
hope so, yeah.
Anyway, lovely to have you on, and hopefully we can have a chat again at some point down the line.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Manu.
Okay.